Welcome to the DevOps Online Summit. My name is Tracy Reagan. I am the track leader for the CICD track, and I have some amazing speakers for this track. I'm so excited today to present Angel Rivera with Circle CI, who's going to be sharing his insights and inspiring us ideas on an interesting topic. His topic today is increase application release confidence with CICD, and I think that's a very interesting place to start. But before I do that, let me give you a little bit of background on Angel. Angel started his career in the U.S. Air Force, a Space Systems Operations Specialist at Cape Canaveral. He has extensive experience with private and public and military sectors. And I don't know if anybody's out there's worked in the military sectors or any of the classified versus non-classified areas, but that does add complexity to the DevOps puzzle. His technical experience includes military spacelift operations, software development, SRE, DevOps engineer, and he has a wealth of experience in defense and federal sectors, such as contracting, information systems, security, and management. And on that, I will push it over to let Angel clarify anything that I may not have said correctly, or just get a discussion going about how to increase application release confidence within the CICD topic, because that is something we all need to learn more about.
Well, you did great, Tracy. I mean,
thanks.
It was my history in a nutshell. It's a pleasure to be here and see you again. So, let's talk increasing application confidence, right?
Yeah, what's inspired you to take that particular topic?
Oh, yeah, so prior to COVID, going out to all the conferences, as developer advocates or CI, I get to engage the community, the industry on basically anything, right, related to technology. And specifically, since I work for Circle CI, right, I focus in more on continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous delivery, also, DevOps in general. And one of the pain points people were having that was kind of a common conversation that kept coming up was how they were deploying their applications, running their CI/CD pipelines, changing code, triggering the pipeline, and running through all their tests, making sure the pipeline was automated, so it's doing all the things that it was programmed to do, it's defined to do, and then it even deployed the application, right, automatically. The problem was once it was deployed, the application was not functioning correctly for whatever reason, right? Like, maybe a misconfiguration in some application configuration file, or maybe the Docker image wasn't built correctly and it was just, failing on start, maybe some parameters there. So like for whatever reason, they were having problems post deployment, right, to the system. And that's when, I started having thoughts about, all right, so how do you, how would you, tackle that problem? Obviously, testing is involved at some point, but is it, we do a lot of testing in our pipelines pre-deployment, but I don't think a lot of people do post-deployment type testing, right? Aside from their observability tools, I think there's more to it than that. And so I had the idea of, creating a talk where, kind of guiding people to build their pipelines, but also have a couple of steps or jobs in their pipelines that actually deploy, their artifacts to the target environments. So if you're deploying to Kubernetes, build your Docker image, then maybe build your cluster using infrastructure as code, and then deploy that, right, as part of your kind of, normal operation. So that release has been deployed to a Kubernetes cluster, and then maybe run some smoke testing, right? You don't want to go too comprehensive, do too much testing, but just a quick, hey, check for an OK200 if it's a service or, website or something. Just simple kind of quick tests to give that release managers like that seal of approval that, okay, we know this was deployed and it functions within a, let's say, Kubernetes cluster if you're doing, a deployment to that. So that's kind of the gist of the idea, is to just add that little layer of, hey, this we know this worked in the environment we're targeting. And that's basically it. It's just as simple as that.
We've heard many years of it worked on my machine, and now I think I hear it worked in my cluster.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So there's some common challenges, regardless if you're doing monolithic or microservices. What do you see as some of those common release challenges that SRE teams and DevOps teams face? I know you talked a little bit about the traceability, but what are some of the other ones that can really ruin somebody's weekend?
Yeah. So the challenges in the releases, I think, are just what I talked about, right? It's just those simple little things that we don't really even consider important, I think, in most cases, because it seems like such a small detail. But in reality, right, those are the small things that trip you up over time. So I think, just figuring out exactly how your pipeline should be orchestrated, so to speak, right? So we do it, like I said, we do a lot of testing in our pipelines where we should be doing a lot of testing in our pipelines. But are we testing the right things in our pipeline? I think that's one of the biggest kind of things to get right? Even for myself, because I think pipelines are living, breathing things. And a lot of people kind of do that set it and forget it, and then you don't really even touch it. They're afraid to touch it because it's humming along nicely.
Yeah, and if you're afraid to touch it, you're not going to achieve the velocity that a modern architecture is going to require, what I like to call DevOps at scale. So,
that's actually right. Yeah.
How can we improve our confidence and still maintain the velocity? I mean, if we're deploying microservices all day long, we're not just talking about once a day or once a week. We're really getting intense deployments. How can we maintain confidence and velocity?
Yeah, so that's where what I talked about, right, is testing the deployments. I guess it's contextual type testing, right? Like, so if you're going to deploy this to a couple different platforms, maybe you're going to deploy a service to Kubernetes, or the same artifact will go into a different cluster somewhere in another part of the world.
That is
right?
part of the problem, right? A different cluster somewhere.
Exactly, and some of that is some of those regional configurations will trip you up if you don't set those properly. Maybe there's a language. There's a lot of different things that can trip you up. And again, I'm a firm believer in trying to test the configurations as well as the application, right? So there's a lot of different things. I mean, you even have security problems in some cases, right? So being able to understand those pipelines and then define them in a way that gives you a lot of flexibility is one of my kind of pieces of advice to folks as well. And also, again, just understanding the fact that the velocity. If you don't tend to your pipelines, you will start seeing your build durations increase over time. It's just like anything else. If you don't pay attention to it,
why is that? I mean, what happens?
Yeah, so a number of reasons. Developers add more dependencies to the application, right? That could be one. Maybe they break your caching mechanism. Sometimes that happens too, right? So cache is really big to help keep your pipelines humming along, because if you don't have to download something, that's just time saved, right, within the pipeline. And those are two of the big things that I've seen. I've also seen where the compute nodes that they're using, as soon as you start adding more tasks to those, right, those compute nodes that are running your code and your pipelines, they're no longer sufficient, right, or capable of processing everything that you have like it used to when the code base was smaller, right? So the code base is growing. There's more things going on. You're probably running, a little bit more comprehensive testing. And eventually, right, those resources on, let's say, if you're using a medium-sized AWS resource class or something for your pipeline, yeah, you probably have 4 gigs and 2 CPUs. Now you need 8 gigs and 4 CPUs, right? So the capacity of your hardware, that's another one. And it's pretty funny that I tell people all the time, like before trying like changing pipelines or reorchestrating how your jobs work, try giving it some more horsepower, right? Upgrade to the next resource class, and it's what we call them in Circle CI. And generally that helps a ton, right? So those are like quick, easy tweaks people can make without having to alter, the workflow of your pipeline or the orchestration of your pipeline. But yeah, the code base and, growing is usually where all of that kind of starts, choking up, becoming the bottleneck, right, in your pipeline. At least that's from my experience.
And when the developers start seeing that, some congestion, and they start seeing those kinds of problems, what are some pipeline, what we call those pipeline-centric concepts that can really help DevOps teams improve the pipeline and their confidence prior to any single release?
Right. So, like I said, when you're running a pipeline, especially CICD, in the concept, or in the realm of CICD, that automation's become critical in most cases to an organization or a team's processes, right, for software development. And when you have that situation that you're now reliant on these systems, you have to understand again how those jobs are being orchestrated, and also ensure that they're consistent. And the way that happens is when you see those, like you're asking about the choke points, that just comes with monitoring things like at Circle CI, we put out a report called the State of Software Delivery. And what that report basically does is give you some insights into how we at Circle CI know and interpret the data of our customers. So we're a cloud-centric CI/CD pipeline. So developers will commit code, push it up, and then we provide the infrastructure and the mechanisms for your pipelines to, basically be triggered, execute, and then we have a ton of data on, about teams and how their software delivery, or pipelines are being processed. So we have benchmarks, so we can identify high-performing kind of teams, and in general, right? So we're not looking specifically at the code and what it's doing, but we know that, hey, there's a Ruby project, and they're testing, they're deploying, they're doing specific things with Docker, because obviously we have the mechanisms there. But we know what the data looks like and how long teams take to recover from maybe a failure, right? So that's one of the things is benchmarking yourself, setting some standards around your team's performance or your pipeline's performance, and saying, like, I like to tell people, I prefer, my preference is to have a 1-minute standard for every pipeline job. Now, that's unrealistic, right? Because you can't control, especially when you're dealing with like a cloud provider's API or someone's services. But it keeps me sharp in my head because when I see things like, let's say, even if I have a 1-minute kind of build duration goal, but I know that if I'm deploying to a cloud provider, it takes 3 minutes. If I start seeing that climb to 7 minutes, right, or 10 minutes, then that's a flag for me to start looking at what's happening. Is it horsepower? Is it code? Is it all of the above, right? And then try to mitigate that so we can get that back down to an acceptable duration. And
does that change? I mean, I'm assuming the answer is going to be yes, but if you are deploying out to a dev may have a shorter pipeline kind of duration versus testing versus production. So what are the differences between those environments, and how can we ensure that it's repeatable across all of them and start getting those production teams where they'll really embrace the CD pipeline? Because what I often see is CI and CDs adopted in development It's adopted it testing, and I think companies like Circle CI have really pushed it into the testing space in a pretty amazing way. We've got to get production doing it too. So, talk to us a little bit about the difference between those environments and, what are the roles in ensuring that those applications are being pushed across a pipeline and not have a wall to production.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point. So I think what I'm seeing, in my conversations, is a pattern where, believe it or not, CICD is still, I would say, in its infancy of being adopted. And I don't know if you agree with that, but
I totally do. I think I think CI, checkout and build, is well adopted, but not workflows across a pipeline.
Right. Yeah. So at least from my experience, right, people, right, this is kind of a new-ish concept to teams. And even if they've been doing, like you said, CI for years, I'm pretty sure that's most of the cases I've talked to. So having this new thing, if they're experienced with it, what I'm seeing is a difficulty in developing context within the pipeline. So when you're talking about development, right, those, in my experience, should be really fast. Developers should not be clogged up by a full end-to-end suite every time they push code. And I see that happening all the time. It's like, why are you testing an integration test for a function that doesn't even do that, right? It's just not contextually right. You should be running maybe, some smoke tests, some tests that are relevant to what it is that you're doing, which is in development. In my opinion, that's all MVP type stuff. So, you want to test for light things. Unit tests are great. Some smoke tests, right? But beyond that, I think that, once the developer's kind of ready to commit this code to a proper shared branch, then you can start a new stage, right? Which maybe is, I don't know, Q&A or right, something like that. And then you can run more extensive testing and the developer's not even involved, right? It's like, okay, let me get the results when it's done, if there is anything to do. Or maybe you have a Q&A team that's, solely focused on that, and they can just deal with those results and maybe potentially fix something, right? And then the developer can be involved in the collaboration. I mean, that's, but what I'm trying to say is, segment your work properly, right? Like, for your organization, look at the stage in your software development lifecycle that'll kind of match your CI/CD pipelines, if that makes sense. Or your
It
workflow.
does, and the people and culture have as much to do with how the CD pipeline should operate and what should be included in it. And within a single company, you can have pipelines that are going to be different. We tend to go to the highest level of control. We go, here's this tight security product, and we're going to define a pipeline, and everybody has to go through that pipeline. But that's not the case, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
So how often should we modify and tweak pipelines? I mean, we should be allowed to. There should be, because not all applications are the same, and not all workflows are the same for every state. So your pipeline should shift and change.
Yeah, it's funny. I think what's going to happen eventually with all this automation, new roles are going to be born out of it, right? In my opinion, I've written a blog about this for 2 years now, and this started again with conversations from people in the industry, and what I've kind of called the roles CI/CD engineers, just something I made up. I figured let me just throw a label on it. And, people were saying, well, this sounds like release engineer or, some other derivative of that, or a DevOps engineer. And I'm like, well, what I'm talking about is specifically someone who's knowledgeable in technology. Maybe they have some coding experience. Maybe they have, cloud architecture experience. But what their focus is essentially maintaining uptime for your CI/CD pipelines, whatever that means, right? And I'm talking about velocity, I'm talking about consistency, reliability, right? So their sole focus is making sure that, okay, developers, should be able to contribute to pipelines, changes especially, right? So if you're building new functionality, maybe there's some new tests that you've written, okay, you should be able to add those and test that pipeline in isolation. But there's also that, right? Uh, there's also the aspect of there's operational needs, there's development needs, there's also being able to talk to the business analysts, right, about the business part of the pipeline, because essentially we're automating our businesses, right, with software. So, it's just a person who's like the focal contact. So they're not quite just pure ops or pure development. They're simply, how do I get all of this automation to complete as quickly as possible, reliably and consistently, right? I think those are three important things in automation.
I think that's an interesting concept to have that person. And, that person could be the person to define the lowest common denominator for all pipelines, right?
Exactly.
So we know that we have requirements at the production pipeline that auditing needs to see certain reports. So there's certain things need to be done at the production level that they do not have to be done at the development level. And to start creating those reusable templates that can be the baseline for a dev team to take it on or a test team to take it on and then production. Because as we started this conversation about confidence and deployments, right? And
that's right.
The team is the most risk averse is the production team.
Of course, yeah.
We always see that they are the least involved in this DevOps pipeline or the CD pipeline anyway. So we really need to bring them into that role. And I think that your idea of having an individual who's responsible for that lowest common denominator of template could actually serve the production. They could be the advocate for production, for testing and development, and allow them to manipulate the workflows as we go forward. So I think it's a great idea. It is more than an SRE, because it's more of a SRE for all the whole process of the life cycle, right? It kind of sits above that.
Exactly.
So
it's almost maybe like a continuous delivery engineer, right? Like
it is
like
a continuous delivery engineer, right?
Right. I mean, that actually smells better.
Yeah, it's a CD engineer. The CD Foundation would love to have that as a title. It elevates CD beyond just compiling code.
That's right, and that's what I'm talking about. Is you should be knowledgeable in a lot of different disciplines, and I don't think it would be someone who's junior, right? Like someone junior, I don't think you have to have experience, right, with all of those things to be able to. But you can also grow that too, those skill sets. But yeah, it's definitely someone who's knowledgeable in that. But I think for me, it's going to be a lot bigger than that. Like it's just basically like controlling automation, right, in a smart manner or more efficient manner. That's what we're going to get to eventually, I think, if we're not already getting there.
So as we close, if there's one thing that you could tell people that they should consider doing to improve the confidence of releases all the way to production, because that's what I believe is the ultimate goal of CD, what would be that one thing?
Yeah, just I guess the one thing I would say, right, is I have a lot of things to say, but I'm trying to pick the one thing that's kind of really important. I think it's just understanding, the different segments of your software lifecycle development processes. Like I said, segmenting the work for developers, segmenting work for maybe QA, segmenting work for security, all the different pieces, and then find that, streamline that, right? So it like decompose it all, but be able to also recompose, right, in a sense. So I think that's my kind of, my key takeaway for folks is to be cognizant of how you're developing your software, because the underlying automation is supposed to help you facilitate that, right, and make you more efficient. I kind of see a lot of folks not doing that, and it slows them down. And then they say, well, Angel, whatever tool I'm using, CICD tool I'm using sucks. If I switch to Circle CI, I should probably get more efficient. And I'm like, well, are your processes matching, right, your pipelines? And, it's funny. A lot of folks come back and say, yeah, I didn't have to switch tools. I just took your advice and looked at what was going on, like you said, culturally, how we're building software and also how we're segmenting our work. within that automation. So yeah,
I think that is
look at
excellent advice, because I
Right.
really do believe in this idea of creating standard templates. And if you can do that and then
Right.
grow them from there, you are addressing all of those different segments. And we have to include the entire family here. We can't just have a discussion on development.
Man,
It's got
no,
to be
right,
the whole
right,
family, the whole culture of the pipeline.
right. But yeah, and I think with the shift left, right, especially in like security, you're seeing that. You're seeing now. I know you and I've had conversation before. I started developing software right in the mid '90s, and I can tell you, I was completely interested in building secure software, but there was really I didn't have any education in security, so to speak, how the enterprises viewed security. So over time, it's just, you would write some code, it would eventually get deployed, or right before deployment, the security team would get their hands on it, run some whatever tests, and then kick it back up, right? And then 3 weeks later, you fixed whatever problems, so like, but now you have the developers are empowered with tools, right? Like that they can even automate in the pipelines, which is what we see a lot of. And it's great because they actually have some skin in the game now, right? Regarding security. And it's not, it's not addressed at the end of the pipeline, pre-production. It's addressed immediately, and it's addressed by the people who are knowledgeable enough to fix it. So if you have a dependency that's vulnerable, right? One of the problems I used to have was the security team would try to update my stack and then create breaking changes, right? Because
Right,
they're
but
not
they
the
needed to
programmers.
do that. But they had to do
Exactly.
that. That was part of the culture, right? That's part of what had to be done.
Yeah. But anyway, but now, right, we're empowered, and I see like really cool changes that I'm really on board with and down with. It's just like, I wish I had them 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's an
15 years
interesting
ago.
time. It's a really, this is a really interesting time for continuous delivery. We're automating so much more. We're embracing so many more of the teams and pulling them into the CD family. And
Right.
I do believe that someday we might see a CD engineer. It's
Well,
possible.
maybe you and I can make that happen. Yeah, I'm still going to write my blogs, right? So
Right.
we'll see. We'll see if we can make that happen.
Angel, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so
Same
much
here.
for joining us today and sharing your insights in how to build confidence in release automation. Thank you.
Oh yeah. Thank you, Tracy.